Right, people, we're back. Victory and Vices podcast. We in full effect. Me, Rory Spooner. You can see Reece Henley is with me again. No James Veck. He couldn't be with us because of scheduling conflicts. But as you can see below, very special guest, Mr. Lee Clark. Lee, thank you for coming along, mate. We really appreciate it. There's so much we want to discuss. Buzzing to have you on. We've been discussing it all week. As I just said to you before you came on now, I'm fascinated by the whole Sudan expedition, shall we say. So, yeah, how are you keeping, mate? How is life in Sudan treating you so far?
First of all, thanks for having us on. Delighted to come on the show and give your listeners and viewers some behind the scenes info. So as far as Sudan, yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying it. We something that I've always considered, going overseas to coach. I had an opportunity a few years ago, and I agreed a deal with an overseas European club, but and the deal was all struck. I was ready to travel and sign, and my father took poorly, so I wasn't prepared to travel abroad while that was the case. So it's always been in the back of my mind to do it. And then when this opportunity came up, I done some due diligence on the club, Al-Merrikh, one of the biggest clubs in Africa. That average 43,000 fans when obviously COVID restrictions are relaxed. And decided to give it a go, compete in the African Champions League. So yeah. I've had a taste of that also. So yeah, really happy. Obviously the culture is obviously different. It's a new experience, and you know, for an Englishman, the heat's something completely different.
What is the temperature out there right now, roughly? Is it like about 40 degrees?
About 42, 44, yeah. We trained at 4 p.m. yesterday and it was 42. We're training at 9:30 tonight. You know, that's been one of the other sides of it. I mean, during Ramadan, we were in training camp in Egypt. Yeah. We had a 3-week training camp in Egypt. And obviously, you know, because of the fasting and stuff that they do during Ramadan, we were training at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning. And so I was still on the training pitch at 3 a.m. with the players some days. And so that was a new experience for us. I tried to do exactly the same as them in terms of the food. I mean, the intake of fluids was the difficult one for us. It wasn't the food times that we ate. That wasn't an issue. But so we're, you know, just trying to buy into the culture of what it's about. The players, obviously, some of them want to pray before the game and some pray at half time also. So, you know, you just have to understand what their culture is and be respectful to that. Because they've been very respectful to me. They've helped us a real amount to settle in quickly.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like having God in your corner if you're down 2-1 at half time, is there? You know, quick prayer if the tactics aren't working. You know, you can't go wrong, can you?
You try everything in this game, so to get a result, no problem.
Hey, look, if it's 3 at the back or if it's a prayer to God, like, you know, throw up a quick prayer as well. I'm with it. No, Newcastle could maybe use a little bit of that as well next season. But yeah, it sounds like culturally, mate, you've adapted quite well. You know, with your the traditional Brit abroad stories, you know, it's, you know, egg and chips for breakfast, egg and chips for dinner, and clearly, you know, you've actually made an effort, which is terrific. In terms of the standard that's out there, did it surprise you? Is there sort of like an equivalent standard that you've seen, maybe like a Championship or League One? Or?
Well, obviously, when we competed in the Champions League, we had a very tough group. And one of our competitors in the group was Al-Ahly, which is the biggest club in Africa. They're based in Egypt. They average 80,000 fans, and they're basically the Real Madrid of African football. They've won the African Champions League 9 times. They've just won the Super Cup there. They're on the way to winning the Champions League again. So we had them, and that standard. You're looking at Championship, you know, you're looking at players who are getting bought to go to the Premier League from those clubs. There's players from their club being talked about going to Serie A, going to the Galatasarays and Fenerbahces of this world. Obviously, we've had very lot of success in the English Premier League with Egyptian players. So that standard. In terms of the local league, our big rivals are Al Hilal, who are managed by one of Jose Mourinho's ex-assistants, and they are huge rivals. they're just across the road, their stadium, and where the two biggest clubs in Sudan will compete for the major trophies. And we played them 2 weeks ago in the first game of the season for the two teams, and we beat them 2-0. So we're 2 points behind them in the league, but we have a game in hand which we should have been playing on Wednesday evening, but there was a floodlight failure, so the game couldn't take place. So we're in a good position. We come off that result and drawn another game and won another one since then. So the players are doing well. There's a break now because the international team, which I have 11 members of that squad. So 11 of my players have gone with the Sudan national team. And that's another part of the football and jigsaw that's coming together well. They qualified for the African nations for the first time in a decade by beating South Africa a couple of weeks ago. I was at the game. And so, it's on an upward curve, the football here. So I'd probably say the league, in terms of the top teams, is anything between the top of the League One, the middle, and the bottom half of the championship. So it's of a good standard. Yeah. The players, they want to work hard. There's some good rules and regulations. Like I'm allowed 5 overseas players in the 20, 11 starters and 9 subs. The goalkeeper has to be from Sudan. Goalkeepers in the league, and I have to play one under 20 player and one under 23 player. So the young national teams are getting benefited by that. And if I substitute them, I have to replace them by those players. So throughout the full game, there has to be at least one player from who's an under 20 player and one player who's an under 23 player in the 11. So I think that's beneficial to the national teams in producing better players.
Yeah,
does throw up one or two issues, because I've got I had 4 players in the squad who fitted those criteria, but one's suspended for the next game after getting a red card, and another one's out for the rest of the season with an ACL injury. So I've had to call up some untried and untested young players from the youth team.
Yeah,
but they'll obviously get an opportunity now, and there's a good chance that they'll be involved in the league games because of the criteria,
And you mentioned about having the opportunity for 5 overseas players. Have you sort of contacted any ex-players or teammates of yours, for example, that might be interested in coming over? Have you had any joy with that?
Yeah, I'm continually looking, and I'm looking in the African markets especially, but I've been speaking to players in the UK. There's been a lot of interest since I've taken the job. The biggest concern for me with the UK players is the heat. We kick off, if we kick off in an afternoon fixture, say at 4 p.m. We played 4 p.m. 2 weeks ago, and it was 48 degrees. And the Sudanese lads, they're used to that. It's normality for them. But what they've even found, because of the intensity I want the team to play at, it's been hard for them as well. We've had to up the fitness levels, and they've improved dramatically in that. But it's obviously still hard for them. So I've got that concern for the British-based players, because it's obviously something they've never experienced, and it's we class a heat wave in England if we get the 20 degrees. So if you're playing in something more than double that, it could have a massive effect. It could obviously affect the intensity the players could play at, but there's certainly.
Oh, we still there?
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Hang on. No, we're still there, I think. It's just froze. Hang on. Technical.
Go from.
Here we go. Sorry, are you still there?
Me?
Yeah, got you back. Yeah, got you back.
Yeah, sorry, Lee, we lost you there for a minute.
Okay, where was I at?
The heat, mate. You were referencing the heat.
Yeah, so the heat for the UK players could be the issue, not the ability, not the personality. I like the fact that I've had a lot of contact from them and they're up for the challenge. So as I said, we've we've played in 48, 49 degrees in the afternoon time before, so that could be a massive issue. So I've got to take that into consideration as well. It's not as simple as, I know him, he's a good player. That's going to be a huge factor, certainly in the intensity I want to play as well.
Yeah, that's like the equivalent of playing in like an oven that has just been put in hell. Like,
well, put it this way, I'm absolutely scorching on the touchline and in the technical area. So I don't really want to try and contemplate what the players are feeling, and obviously I'm putting big demands on them as well. So in terms of, because we've upped the intensity, we've upped the fitness levels. That's one where we've improved the tactical side of the game for them as well. But they've been brilliant. But I've just got to be careful if I do bring any European type players that they can handle that side of it.
Yeah, well, do you know what? It's interesting that you mentioned that, Lee, because obviously the Qatar World Cup coming up now, it's going to be, the conditions are going to be very similar. And I was thinking to myself the other day, because I don't know how closely you follow sort of the news back home or the news in Africa, but one of the Manchester United youngsters, Hannibal Mejbri, he decided to play for Tunisia instead of France, because he wants to try and help an African nation win a World Cup. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a really nice thing, that he's decided he wants to try and push an African nation to the front. And there's no better opportunity, it seems, for an African nation to thrive than maybe Qatar. Would that be a fair shout?
Without a doubt, I think the temperature, the heat is going to be a huge factor. If you kind of, I would imagine the European teams and England especially will have to change the tactical approach.
Yeah.
It'll have to be and international football is completely different to club football in any way. It's played at a different tempo, and the pressure on the ball is what we'll do with a high press.
Yeah.
That doesn't really often happen in international football. I know England are trying it, but that would be a question mark whether they could do it in the heat of Qatar. I think you're going to see lots of tactical changes from the European teams and how they manage the game, how they manage the players manage the game. And as you say, there's going to be no better opportunity for an African nation to become successful because of that factor. And it's going to be a huge factor, whether we like it or not. It's a simple factor when you're talking about the winning of a World Cup, because people can talk about formations and tactics and the top players coming to the fore. But believe me, this is going to be huge, make a huge impact on what they do and how teams can win the game and win the competition.
I think with regards to the World Cup especially, I think it's definitely, it's obviously going to suit the players who are used to, hotter temperatures. I think the big losers would be sort of countries like England or like, other British countries who may qualify or the Scandinavian nations. The average temperatures there are around 25 degrees and it's obviously being played around Christmas time rather than the summer when it's hotter. So I think it definitely suits the African countries as well as sort of the Mediterranean countries, South American countries especially. But I think, the more northern European nations, they really would have to adapt their tactics. I think we could see sort of a lot of tired long ball football from them, which sort of gives it an added dimension. But obviously, with regards to yourself, Lee, I don't know if you can hear me because we were having sort of some technical difficulties with you. But with regards to yourself, we know we've got a lot of Newcastle fans who are in the viewership here, and I think we recently interviewed Nobby Solano, Warren Barton. I wanted to get your take on sort of being part of the entertainers, and I wanted to see, what was it like being part of that?
Yeah, no problem. Great era. Fantastic era for the football club. People say that, when you come second, you're nothing and you don't get remembered, and that's usually the case. But the entertainers seems to have booked the trend, and we're remembered very fondly because the way we went about our business, the way we come through the Championship to the Premier League, and our manager, our leader, Kevin Keegan, tell everyone we weren't there to make up the numbers, and we were there to challenge the teams at the top, which probably at the time got ridiculed a little bit, but that's the way Kevin was, and he had high demands on everybody, so he put those pressures on us straight away, and they worked. He put us pressures, how he pressurised us as players. He kept buying better and higher quality players every time he was bringing a player in, and improved the starting 11, improved the squad. So the players that were already there had to up their game, and I think that's how we got the best out of everybody.
So what changed then when he came in? I mean, was there something that almost changed overnight, the approach or anything like that?
Well, what happened when he came in, there'd been a change of ownership. Sir John Hall had not long been in. So there was, and the conversation is out there in the public domain. It was basically Sir John Hall saying to Kevin, "You've got the leadership qualities, the tactical nous, anyone will come and want to play for you, and I've got the money, and let's us do it together." And that's what they've done. So John backed Kevin financially, rebuilt St James's Park, allowed him to bring in top quality players throughout the journey. From all over the world, and Kevin's knowledge and passion and enthusiasm and leadership qualities and love for Newcastle United done the rest on the pitch. And it basically about he put together a group of players that respected opponents but never feared anybody, and it was not going to change the way we played. We prepared and played, or tried to play, every single game in the same way, whether home or away, whether in domestic competition or European competition. It was about what we were doing.
Yeah. And why do you think you just couldn't sort of get over the line and win that trophy?
Well, obviously the closest we came, 95, 96, when at one stage we were 12 points clear. There's many defining factors. There's that we didn't have enough people in the group who'd experienced that situation. I mean, for a long majority of the time, Peter Beardsley had done it at Liverpool. And I'm not too sure who else had done it. I mean, David Batty came in late in the season and he'd experienced it at Blackburn. So I think at the important stage, Manchester United had that. And ultimately in the final hurdles, we didn't win enough games. We didn't keep the distance between ourselves and Manchester United. It's something that they couldn't reach. They had Cantona and Schmeichel, who were in inspired form, and we didn't pick up enough wins in the final stages.
Yeah, that sort of that ideology at Newcastle, where, like you said, they were very respectful of their opponents, but obviously they would go out and try and play their own game. They had their own philosophy. It seems to have eroded from the club over the years, and some people would say that's due to an owner maybe that doesn't care. If I was owning Newcastle United now, I would look back at those golden years and I'd be like, right, I want to replicate them. But it seems like Mike Ashley doesn't have any interest in it. I just wanted to get your take on his ownership. What do you think of Mike Ashley?
When I've been in his company, I was there when he first arrived. I was a coach there when he first arrived, and Sam Allardyce was manager. And socially, he was a top fella. I've been in his company before, down at Fulham when Newcastle played there, and enjoyed being in his company socially. As an owner, absolute garbage. There's nothing more you can say. The club has no ambition. As long as it stays in the Premier League. If you finish fourth bottom, he's a happy owner. The infrastructure of the club is so far back from the other Premier League clubs. I'm not talking about infrastructure. I don't mean St James's. It's fantastic arena. Everything's fine there. I mean, the training facilities and this nonsense that Lee Charnley come out with about we're investing in the squad rather than the training facilities. Absolute rubbish. It's not going to take mountains of money. They have the two sites there for the first team and the academy. They just need to upgrade it. That was a huge frustration for Rafa Benitez. I know that. One thing when he first arrived, he got an upgraded and up-to-date 4G pitch for the academy, which is one of the stipulations for Category 1 status. But that's the only thing that he could force through. I mean, the training facility at the first team is exactly the same as when I was there. Just it's had new paintings put up, new pictures. It's been painted a little bit, but the structure of it. I mean, you go around the country and you're seeing, hydro pools, recovery baths, cryo chambers. People might say, "Oh, what's all this about?" But this is 21st century football. This is when you're paying these commodities, i.e., the players, huge amounts of money. You've got to protect them. You've got to try and get them out on the pitch as safely as possible in a very competitive league. And, the facilities are huge. And, Newcastle's facilities are so outdated, it's untrue. We've probably got the third worst training ground in the northeast behind Middlesbrough and Sunderland. Well, in fact, we'll probably have. I said we probably have. Well, in fact, we have. Yeah. There's two ways about it. So, the ambition. I think the players are looking for help, as I've just touched on before. Under the entertainers with Keegan, we were inspired by when more new signings came in, better quality players that drove us to become better. The players who were already there. I think the players that are currently at Newcastle now want to see better players come in. They want to see to drive them on, to also make them become better players. You become a better player when you play with better players. It's as simple as that. And I think they're needing help. I think the run they've had at the end of the season shows that there's something there that can be worked on to finish in the position they did, 12th. Great achievement, not acceptable achievement, but great achievement from where they were in the group they've got. I think with a couple of proper additions in the summer that can prove, that will prove costly. But that's the way the Premier League is. If you want to try and be competitive and make inroads into the top 10, and then try and after that make inroads into the European competition positions, you have to spend a bit of money. And COVID's affected everybody. But there has to be some kind of and what happens is the anger and the frustration that's aimed at the owner then gets directed elsewhere, i.e. the manager, and sometimes at the players. And yes, I understand some of it. Steve's a good mate of mine, so I haven't enjoyed some of the stuff I've read or seen or heard about Steve at all. I've really felt the pain for him and his family. I understand the frustrations of the fans because some of the runs, I think with 2 wins and 22, was it at one stage?
Yeah, 24.
Yeah, that's a horrendous run in anyone's eyes, and Steve knew that. He realised that he was under pressure, and rightly so, because of that type of run and the players were performing. I just think that there needs to be a bit of help there. There needs to be allowed to bring in some quality. That there is the basis of some really quality players, but you see when we lose those players, the Callum Wilsons and the St Maxims, we still struggle. So there has to be some strength and depth. There has to be some quality to the squad. We do need some help in midfield. And there's other areas of the starting 11 that could be improved. So, listen, there's talk now, there's been in the last 48 hours, there's refreshed talk that the takeover could be back on, could be imminent in the next month. It's fingers crossed, because if there's someone can do that, who has the funds to put in place what I've just said, the term and the old cliche is sleeping giant, but this could awaken a sleeping giant and could threaten the big six.
Yeah, well,
if they stay in the English Premier League and they don't disappear.
Well, we'll come on to the big six in a minute, but I wanted to build on what you said there. I mean, with Steve Bruce, I was interested to get your take on the season, like you said, and obviously on Steve Bruce as a whole, and obviously he's a friend of yours, Steve, and I know that Steve Bruce, for all the players seem to really buy into what he's doing. They seem to like him as a manager, and that seems to be across the board. There's a lot of players who agree with that statement, and there's a lot of people in the media who agree with it as well. But I think from the fans' perspective, they've really, really not taken to Steve Bruce at all. I think there was there was a reluctance to accept them at first. And I think in order to...
Can I just interrupt you there? And this is, I had a similar situation, but on a much lower scale, when I went in at Blackpool under the Oystons. And I immediately got tarred with, I was a puppet for Carl and Owen Oyston. I was their man. I was a believer in what they were doing. The fans were at loggerheads with them, and rightly so, which I found out to my own detriment, further down the line after I accepted the job at Blackpool in the Championship, because the infrastructure there was horrendous. It was non-league. I mean, no, I'm being disrespectful to non-league. The way the club was run. The way the club was run, etc. And I wasn't a believer in what the Oystons were doing. I was given an opportunity after being sacked in the Championship by Birmingham to resume that role in the Championship with Blackpool. You need a massive ego as a manager. I had that, and what I believed with the 4 points from the first 14 games that Blackpool had, that I still could keep them up, and if I kept them up, it would be the best thing I could ever put on my CV, because it was a nut job. But when I realised when I got in there, it was a bigger issue and bigger problems. But the fans never ever took to us, even from the first day, because they believed that. Because I was appointed by the Oystons, I was a believer in what they were doing. I was on their side, which was never the case. And I think on a bigger and higher profile, that has been the thing with Steve.
Could I play devil's advocate with that one? I mean, Rafa Benitez was appointed by the same group of people, and he was well received by the fans. And with regards to that's another
bone of contention with myself. I mean, Steve's been criticised by the standard of football, the type of football. I've got to say, under Rafa, there was some horrific games. And remember, just before Christmas, my two old clubs, Newcastle, Fulham, played out a 0-0. I was at the game under Rafa's reign, and it was probably up there with one of the worst Premier League games I'd ever seen. And Rafa was always, and even at the big clubs he managed, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Liverpool, he always started off with a defensive side. Yeah, there was the organisation. Now, what Rafa done, and he done it well, he played the media unbelievable against Mike without really having a go officially at Mike, and that's what won him, I think, the fans. Because what really frustrates me is Rafa's held in the same esteem as Sir Bobby Robson and Kevin Keegan at the moment.
I think rightly so.
And he never achieved anything in comparison to what those two guys achieved.
I agree with you in the sense that he didn't achieve anything comparable to the legends of that you named. But I think for Newcastle fans, it is such as yourself, Liam, and obviously you're a Newcastle fan as well, and obviously your input is invaluable with this. But I mean, it's about attitude, isn't it? It's about wanting more for the club, and I think that like you said, he's played the media well, Rafa.
So do you think Steve Bruce just wants to finish fourth bottom? Do you think Steve wants that stress and the pressure? Do you think Steve wants the social media reaction against him and his family?
No, it's a fair question. It's a fair question.
Steve was born on the banks of the Tyne. Yes, I hear this stuff. He's a Man United man. Well, ultimately, he was a Man United man because Newcastle United didn't come and buy him, and he went and played for the biggest club in the country at the time and won trophies. That wasn't Steve's fault. Ultimately, he's got back. He's gotten a job that any Geordie involved in football would want. Now, listen, I've said some of the performances and results and the runs of results under Steve have been horrendous. And, probably lucky that he was working for Mike Ashley with a 2-22 run. This isn't me or Lee Clark sticking up for his pal Steve. No, this is me talking about Newcastle United. I want, whoever's the manager, I want us to win. I want us to win FA Cups or the leagues or get into Europe, be successful. I just think our club at the moment, it winds me up how least appreciation the 1969 lads get. The first cup winners, Joe Harvey, he's got there's a bust of just his head around St. James's. That man should have a statue. Should be up there with Sheeran Milburn because he captained the club to FA Cup wins. He took the club to the FA Cup final. He won the Fairs Cup. No man's done anything more than that man for the club. And there's a small bust at the Gallagher end for him. So, you know, it's a balancing act. It's trying to, you know, you say that, you know, Rafa had more drive and more belief. I don't know the exact words he used than probably Steve, because I've seen the words Steve's Mike Ashley's man and all that. You think Steve enjoys losing? You think Steve enjoys the stick and the pressure that comes with the job, and he wants to finish fourth bottom? You not think Steve would love to be 10th, 8th, 6th, just like Rafa would?
Well, I mean, my take on that is it's a completely fair point, Lee, what you're saying. And obviously what Rafa did is the football was poor for a long period of time under Rafa. And whether there was a mentality switch or whether the feeling around the club was different, that's really not important. I suppose the main criticism, I mean, I could sit here, I could compare Steve Bruce to Rafa Benitez, but it's chalk and cheese. The main criticism I would have is Rafa Benitez never had the benefit of having about 150 million spent on the squad, and Steve Bruce did that and got worse. That is the main criticism that the Newcastle fans would have had of Steve Bruce and his appointment. Yes, he wasn't first.
So when you say it got worse, in what way? Because it finished 12th.
The performances.
Right.
Okay. So I mean, with Newcastle fans, yeah, there's the people who would say, I would rather finish 17th and play great football than 8th and play bad football. I don't agree with that necessarily. But I think...
Well, do you know the more times you play great football, the more times you're probably winning anyway. So it goes hand in hand. You become unlucky a couple of times when you play well and you lose. And unless you're a real soft touch. Then you're only worried about what you do with the ball, and you have got players who aren't interested in what you do without the ball. And then you play good football, but you just get smashed every week. Well, those teams don't even last 2 minutes in the Premier League.
Exactly. I mean, you look at Bournemouth. Bournemouth played terrific football, but I think over the course that they played in the Premier League, I think they averaged conceding 3 goals a game, which is actually ridiculous. So it is a bit of be careful what you wish for with regards to that one. But I mean, I think with Newcastle fans, I mean, there needs to be this. I mean, you're trying to pack out a 52,000 seat stadium, and there needs to be a sense of optimism. And Steve Bruce, I think, has the lowest percentage win rate in the Premier League history. I believe, or he's in the top of the lowest 4. So I think when you look at things like that, it doesn't inspire as much confidence.
Listen, not comparing Steve Bruce with Rafa Benitez. Rafa's won the biggest of anything in club football. And he's a fantastic manager. I'm not questioning his CV. What I'm saying is, you know, the standard of football, you know, wasn't dramatically different. Yes, we had towards the end of his reign, I think the last 10 games, you know, they looked like the shackles were brought off.
They were really improved.
Yeah, and it did improve. And you could say there's been a similar situation to this season with the run we've just had in some positive results. So I don't know whether the players feel the shackles come off when they are then guaranteed to stay in the Premier League and they feel more relaxed to produce their normal performances. That could be levelled. So, you know, there's no debate. There's no debate on the stats and the CVs of Rafa and Steve at all. I'm just saying that you know, let's not go overboard with what Rafa done.
Of course,
because there wasn't a lot of exciting. And also, you know, I know he didn't have as much, what you mentioned, the amount that Steve had, what Rafa had. You know, Rafa's been one of those coaches that's made huge mistakes in the transfer market as well with some of his signings. So, you know, we have to, you know, that's one of the balancing acts as a coach or a manager, getting the recruitment right and getting more signings. More positive than I think it's all to do with what happens at the top and
exactly.
Listen, who knows what Rafa could have achieved if he had that money and he had an owner that was prepared to. And I think any manager, I think it's so difficult. I look at how 2 absolute club legends have been treated by the owner in Shearer and Keegan, and it tells me that there's no love for the club whatsoever. It's just to finish 4th bottom and happy days, collect the television money every year. Knowing 52,000 are going to come in, week out, collect that money. I mean, for an astute businessman, the biggest thing he ever done was changing the club retail services to sports direct services, because that would have been a massive drop in income. Because Newcastle fans love wearing the replica shirts, love buying the club stuff. So that was an issue. But no, listen, going off piste a little bit there, but I just think that not this argument will just keep going round and round and round until the ownership changes.
No, absolutely. It's whatever you think of Steve Bruce, whether it's you think he's a terrific manager, whether you think he's not a terrific manager, either way, it's Mike Ashley that's the problem, and like you rightfully said, and nothing will change. Even managers like Rafa Benitez, who come in with the reputation that they've got, still struggled, and that is because of what Mike Ashley has done for the club, like you rightfully say.
Yeah.
You're talking about what Bournemouth do, and I see what Eddie Howe's been obviously touted, and Eddie's a terrific young coach.
Mm-hmm.
But if Eddie tries to play the expensive football that he played at Bournemouth, he might end up getting similar results, because is the quality of player there to do it? Do we have the players who can play out from the back?
Yeah.
Do we have the players who can play through the units and the lines of the team, but also be very strong defensively? So these are all the aspects. And without any investment in the team, it's very difficult to do that. Without any investment properly in the academy in terms of the facilities and the players, how are we going to bring some fantastic youngsters through? So it all adds up.
It does. Speaking of management, because it's a tough gig, it's a beautiful job, it's like the dream job, but at the same time, there's some poison chalices out there, and it's on a good day.
It's a beautiful job. You come and sit in this seat for 5 minutes, you'll change your mind.
Well, that's what people say. I mean, I'm only going off what the next man is saying, but I'm curious to get your approach on management, because not only have you managed obviously in different countries, but you've managed, shall we say, some interesting individuals, and I'll touch upon them in a moment. I wanted to ask you, obviously, as a manager, you've been across a few different clubs. Is there a particular player you've managed that you feel is the best player you've managed? Like, I'd have that lad at every single club with me. Was there a particular player that really impressed you?
I've been lucky. I've had some great lads. I mean, one that sticks out because of what he'd done both on the field and off the field was Jordan Rhodes at Huddersfield.
Yeah.
And who, was just re-signed for them. So Jordan was a phenomenon in terms of his goal-scoring record, but he was such a lovely... He was anything but the stereotypical footballer. He was bright. He was polite.
Yeah.
He was respectful. He didn't have any ego. He didn't have a chip on his shoulder. He was the easiest player to manage. Whatever decision I made or whatever I told him, he took on board and he tried to do. And he was obviously a goal-scoring phenomenon. We paid a down payment of 350,000 for him from Ipswich. I think it rose to about 800 once the club got promoted, but they sold him to Blackburn for 12 million. So he's one. There's other lads that are just fantastic, great attitudes, give you no problem off the field. And whereas there's other players who don't deliver anything and give you problems off the pitch as well. And there's also lads who deliver, but you've got to manage them properly. You've got to treat you put the same rules and regulations down for them all. You stipulate what your beliefs are and your principles, but you have to treat the individual a bit different. Some need a kick up the backside and they respond to that, and you quickly work those ones out. And it's probably a lot of the time it's the more senior players and the more like high profile. So it's good that you can have that relationship with them, because if you're a manager and you go for the guys at the top in terms of you give one of them a bit of a kick up the backside in front of the other group, it means that the other group look and say, well, he treats it like that, it's not a problem, But there's other players that you have to take to one side. And the game's evolving, the world's evolving. Whereas when I played, managers would be in your face throwing cups of tea and teapots and all that. trays of sandwiches sliding down dressing room walls and stuff like that. The modern day footballer doesn't respond to that. And even any criticism probably is done on a one-to-one basis, backed up with footage and stats, and done in that type of way. But there's sometimes like the old school has to come into play to try and get a reaction. But it is managing the group and managing the situation. Listen, you basically got 25 men or boys with all different personalities and all different assets and all different makeup of what they're about.
Yeah. Being a football manager is fascinating in that respect, because you're taking, as you say, a group of 25 lads, different race, different religion, different background, different assets, and it's very complex. And the man management side of things is very fascinating. The players I wanted to touch upon, there was two very interesting individuals. The first one, and I'm curious because the greatest manager potentially ever couldn't get the best out of him, Sir Alex Ferguson. So that was Ravel Morrison. When you had Ravel, obviously the ability is unquestionable, but how do you think Ravel never took that next step to become the best personal player he could be?
Basically, I'll just follow what Sir Alex said a few weeks ago when he was speaking about him. He got asked in an interview and he just said Ravel's lifestyle got the better of him. His childhood, who he grew up with, his friends, I don't think they were bad guys. His friends, they just went down a different path. They didn't have the ability of Ravel.
Yeah. Oh, still there? Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, mate. Sorry, you were saying, Ravel, the lifestyle.
Yeah, he's done some foolish things. He's not a bad boy. Deep down, there's a heart there. He's an unbelievable talent. It's a scary talent in terms of what he can do with a football. He's got the speed of a winger. He can hit any range of pass, a 60-yarder onto a 5-inch or the Ivor Needle pass. He can score because he goes past people for fun. He's got great fitness levels. And yeah, he does some silly things, but there's examples where he's done some silly things with me, and when I've gone back into the office, he's sitting there waiting. My PA's put him in the office and he's with his head down to apologise straight away. If he hated the other side of training, the fitness, the sports science, the strength and conditioning, but if I put him with a football and said, well, I had to train for 5 or 6 hours, he'd be at the front because he loved being with the ball. The stories of him, we'd done a light training session on a Thursday because we had Middlesbrough at home on the Friday on Sky Television. And when I went back into the staff changing room at about 5-6 p.m. on the Thursday night, I could hear giggling and stuff coming from the first team changing room. We thought that was strange because the players had been away since midday after just a light session day before the game. Went in and was Ravel and his friends getting showered up, getting changed. And when I asked him what he'd been doing, he'd been up on the academy pitches playing 1v1s against his pals for 5 or 6 hours. Now, I had 2 options. I would give him a rollicking to say because he's got a game tomorrow and he could be tired. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, at least he's not out in his car or out with his mates somewhere, getting into a little bit of bother, So it was a balancing act with him. It's a crying shame. We've lost a phenomenal footballer. We've lost a phenomenal talent. No matter what he does now, he should have been, if everything was put together in terms of how we've done things on and off the field, he should have been a mainstay for the England team and playing for one of the biggest clubs in either England or Europe. As Sir Alex said, and this is the standout statement for me, Ravel Morrison, the best player technically to come out of Manchester United's academy ever.
Yeah.
And when you think about the players who've come through that, world-class players who've come through it, that's some statement on its own. So that's telling you the type of player you are dealing with.
Yeah. Do you know the other lost soul I wanted to touch upon? And I suppose Ravel's done all right for himself. He's earned a good living, but as you say, he's never gone on to be the lad he should have been. The other lad I wanted to touch upon, and I think you may have dealt with him. you may have dealt with him briefly if he ever decided to show up for work, was Nile Ranger. Nile's another one, another product of his environment, comes from a very tough background. And he's another lad that seemed to have all the fundamentals at a young age. He's tall, he's strong, he's quick, he's got a bit of technique, he knows where the onion bag is. But again, would you say it was just a lifestyle issue with him as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't be so complimentary about Nile. I had Nile at Blackpool.
Yeah.
There was an underlying wanting to be what do I say, a gangster. Yeah. He's always had that. He thought himself as that. Got himself into some really, really bad situations. Yeah. Left me in November at Blackpool, saying he was going to the dentist appointment, November the 6th, because I'd left it actually November the 5th. I'd named the team to play my old club Birmingham the next day on November the 6th, and Nile wasn't in the starting 11, said he had a dentist appointment, he couldn't attend training. I never seen him since. Was nowhere near in terms of technically like Ravel. In terms of, yes, he had the attributes of a strong, quick striker. But for me, there was always this side of him that he preferred the glamour of I suppose the modern day, being that in that type of environment to what it was to being a footballer, and so wasn't a real popular person with me at all. So and, not many compliments from me going Nile Rangers. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, fair enough. I mean, no, as a Newcastle fan, I remember watching him break into the team, and I remember thinking to myself, I mean, just based on his early performances for Newcastle, I thought this guy's going to be a terrific target man. And I don't know what it was. I mean, like you said, it was his lifestyle, and it's just such a shame. How it
wasn't just his lifestyle though. When I talk about Ravel with his training and that, Nile had many days where he just didn't try a leg as well. So don't get fooled. They're completely different animals. One was an unbelievable talent who loved football. As I said, the sports science and all the modern stuff that comes with it, which is just as important. He never embraced at all, Rav. But Nile, there'd be days he just wouldn't turn up to training. There'd be days where he turned up and he might as well have not turned up. He didn't try. So there's no comparison between the two for me after managing them both.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, speaking of managers, again, a firm favourite of ours, and I know he's a good friend of yours too, is Chris Coleman. Obviously, back home, Chris is he's a hero to us. Not just Wales, born in Swansea, where I'm from, and guiding Wales in the Euros. Just honestly, like the best moment of my life was seeing Al Robson-Kanu score that goal. Like I've never jumped so high in my life. And I wanted to get your opinion on Chris, because he seems like a great lad. Obviously, you played alongside him, you played under him. What is he like as a manager?
Well, listen, first of all, he's a great mate. When I first signed for Fulham, him and his family, he was the captain. He helped us settle in so quickly, become very good friends very quickly. A terrific player, left-footed, very accomplished on the ball, but physically strong, good specimen, tactically aware. Obviously the injury that ended the career was horrendous. I mean, the backdrop to that story was he was meant to be coming to White Hart Lane with me the night of the accident to go and watch Newcastle play Spurs. And his wife couldn't get back in time for the children, so he had to make the journey, and that's when he had the crash, unfortunately. But even then, he was still in high spirits. It obviously hit him hard that, ending his career so early when he was just on the up as well. Did I ever see him to become a manager? Not at the time, not when we played with him. But when he took over at Fulham, he was inspired. I was really, I was his captain, but, there was loads of pride because I seen how well he took to the job. Anyone who managed me needed a medal because I must have been an absolute nightmare to manage. So, he done a terrific job. Real good job. He made some, when I talk about recruitment, he made some great signings.
Yeah.
He's a top guy. I mean, you talk about that Euros. I mean, I was in Spain and you know, it was like I turned into a Wales fan all of a sudden. I was watching those games and I was jumping up and down in restaurants and bars, wherever I was on those games. And it was just phenomenal what he'd achieved with them. He got them playing in such a way as well. The togetherness, that's what came across, the togetherness of the whole group.
Yeah.
Was superb. Chris had obviously created a bond between him and the staff and the players that looked unbreakable. You know, they were. It was fantastic. He's very similar in terms of me. He was perfect for the Sunderland job, but it was the wrong time. He took over a club that was in absolute turmoil. That didn't matter who was in charge; it wasn't going to change. There was a lot of disharmony behind the scenes with players and staff. It was a fractured club. The supporters were at loggerheads with the owner, Ellis Short, at the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a great atmosphere to be in. It was a great, and he went in there and he was blown away by the facilities, the training ground, the academy, the stadium, and the potential if they could get promoted. But it was never going to happen. I mean, look, it's still there now. It's with a new owner. But because of the new rules with financial fair play, people all think, oh, got a new owner who's worth billions. Unfortunately, down at that level, it doesn't work because it becomes a level playing field with the financial fair play. And then what happens is you're the big fish in a small pond. Everyone raises their game. You've basically got League One players. And have they got the mentality and two, the more importantly, the ability to respond to that challenge of being the big fish? In what's happened in Sunderland's case, and a lot since they've been there, they haven't been able to respond. So it's not an easy league when you're the big guy. If you don't get out immediately, I think that's the key. Whenever you go down, you've got to be able to get out immediately. If you don't, you spare. When I managed in League One with Huddersfield, there was 12 clubs in League One at that time who'd been in the Premier League. You had your Sheffield clubs, Wednesday and United. You had Leeds United. You had Norwich City. You had Southampton. Just to name Charlton Athletic. It was a league that was littered with clubs that had been in the Premier League. So the longer you stay, the harder it becomes. And obviously, Chris, as I said, was he had that job at the wrong time. But I know Chris is a big believer and he enjoys working abroad. So he obviously had his stint in China, but I think he's still speaking to him. He still obviously is looking for the right opportunity.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I wouldn't want to speak out of turn at the moment, Lee, but I think that there's likely to be that opportunity back at Wales soon. If things go in a certain direction, and I don't know whether he'd be inclined to take it, but I wanted to ask the question then, I suppose, as an ex-Sunderland player and obviously as an ex-Newcastle player and fan, and a friend of Chris Coleman, given the way that they treated him towards the end. I mean, how do you feel towards Sunderland now that they're in League One? I mean, how did you feel when they were in the playoffs and things like that?
There's no link to me in that club anymore. There's no staff there. The fantastic kit man they had there, John Cook, they let go after so many years. There's no real staff there anymore. There's a couple, Kevin Ball and that, but even the academy staff. So there's no real link. That ship sailed. I think the new sporting director there, Christian Speakman, I've got a link to. He was my academy director at Birmingham when I was the manager there, so I know how he operates. He's very astute in terms of the, getting the off the field stuff going in the right direction. As I said, they've got new ownership, but it's not as simple as that. Thinking, we've got a young guy with billions. I just think hey, listen, they might do it. They might do it this year. I don't know, but the longer you stay down at that level, is the harder it comes. And I personally would want them back in the Premier League because the Derby days were always something I look forward to as a player. I loved them. I loved the occasion. I think the fans love that. There's still a little touch of old school when you have the Derby games as well. The feeling with the fans and stuff like that. So I like that. I would like that to happen, just for the selfish reasons of having Newcastle Sunderland derby matches. But the club's changed so much since I had the 2-year spell there. So there's my priority in terms of the team I support is Newcastle, and wanting them to do better than they have been.
Yeah, no doubt. Speaking of international football, we touched upon Chris. The Euros are just around the corner. How do you think England are going to do in the Euros? Do you think do you think they got a good chance of winning it, or is it sort of maybe just get to the quarters? Because I think, is it either France or Portugal they could face, Reece? Is it in the last 16?
If they win the group, they're better off finishing second.
Yeah, listen, I think we've got a ridiculously strong squad. I think that was proven with the 4 right backs, which caused a lot of debate. But that they were all top quality. Interesting to see who he replaces Trent Alexander-Arnold with, whether he goes with a more attacking player or he goes with a defensive. I'm hoping, from a selfish point of view, it'll be Jesse Lingard, because I work with Jesse at Birmingham. I had him on loan. He's a great kid. I think now the story's out of why he had that little downturn in his form with family issues he had. People see him in a different light. There was a lot of criticism he received, but when they see what he's done as a young man, trying to look after his mum with the mental health issues, excuse me, and his young brothers, his siblings, shows the mark of the guy. He's went to West Ham and been phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I personally like that, because I know the boy and I know what he's about. I just think we've got ridiculous talent. We talk about, we've got Grealish and Foden, Madison not even there. So it's just like Kane, obviously, the most sought after striker with Haaland in Europe, with Lukaku, the 3 of them. But some difficult opponents as well. I watched the Spain-Portugal friendly last night. They're still obviously strong teams. When you've got a player like Cristiano Ronaldo, no matter how old he is, he's like Peter Pan, and he just keeps, his age goes up, but his performance levels never drop. So when you've got a player like that who can turn any game on its head, I think there's 4 or 5 countries, but I am expecting England to do really well. I think Gareth Southgate's played it well, the way he's blooded the youngsters in over a period of time, the quality of the youngsters, and what they've already achieved in the game at such a young age. It just, what's hurt us, and what seems to hurt us in the past, you always go into these major competitions with doubts over important players with injuries, and we still include them, and then they end up doing playing, and we've wasted a spot in the squad or whatever. So we've got that with Henderson and Maguire at the moment.
I was going to ask you that about Henderson.
We've had it with Beckham in the past. We've had it with Rooney. And I know you've sometimes got to take that risk, but it just seems to always happen to us on the eve of the big tournaments.
Yeah.
And it leaves a little bit of a doubt, will he, won't he? And that becomes like in the media, and that becomes the media attention. That's the whole soul. And does it take away the focus of the group? I don't know, because they're like sometimes living in their own bubble. But you do, as a supporter, you get bored because you're hearing the same stories of, is he going to make it? Is he not? All this type of scenario. So I think there's a decision to be made on those 2, even though they're influential, Henderson and Maguire. Are they going to play any significant part? And if they're not, they would quickly get replacements in. I don't even know what the rules and regs are about that. Are we past the point of no return where we can call replacements in, or is there still that possibility?
I think it's past the point of no return. It's interesting, because I wanted to ask you about that. Obviously, as an ex-pro, deep down you know if you're fit or not, right? And Mason Greenwood actually turned around and said, look, I'm exhausted after this season. I'm not in a position where I can play for England, which I thought was quite a noble thing to do. He held his hands up and said, look, as much as I'd love to be there, I can't, So he gave his spot to someone else. Should Henderson and Maguire have given their spots to someone else? Bear in mind, Henderson hasn't played since February, and he's not going to play the first game either by the looks of things. So he may not even feature at all. So should he have just sort of given his spot and said, look, lads, I can't do it? Would you have done that as a pro?
That's an extremely tough question, isn't it? Because representing your country in a massive international tournament.
Yeah.
And, Mason Greenwood, I think, was more to do with fatigue, which is really understandable, because for such a young boy, he's played so many games for Manchester United. When you're playing for Manchester United, the pressure ultimately is huge. He's played in high-profile games. That causes emotional and physical fatigue. He's probably played more games because of how well he's done than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted to play him in, but his form has forced him to play him in more games, both in domestic and European competitions. And the lad's just blown up, and he couldn't give any more physically. I think the difference between Maguire and Henderson is injuries. There must be injuries that they think they can get over, because if there's any long-term damage, and what the medical teams must be saying that they can get over as well. Because I think the medical teams would like to make a quick decision and would like to inform Gareth Southgate and his staff. They don't want to end up with egg on their face that they say, oh, he could be available for the second game, etc., and then he doesn't play any time in the tournament. It doesn't look great on them. The players will be... One of them, you know, with how I used to judge injuries that I could play with and I couldn't is once the game started, if the injury that I had gone and my focus and my zone I'd zoned in on the game and the injury wasn't on my mind anymore, it meant that I could get through it and I could play with it. And then once the game finished, I could feel the pain was there because you had no focus then. But once the game started, if the injury was in the front of my mind, it meant that the injury was too bad for us to continue. Yeah. And that's how I personally done it myself. Hey, listen, there's probably been games where I shouldn't have started games. But you'd rather have players like that than players who drop out at the smallest thing, I've got to say. But I get your point. From a selfish point of view and a supporter's point of view, you're saying, we're going to waste a couple of positions. But those lads have been great performers for their country. They've been, you know, they've done really well. Henderson and Maguire, they've showed a great appetite. They've never missed many international occasions, training or games with injuries. It's just unfortunate, yeah. And I've got to say, both players must think they've got a chance, and in the medical team also, because for them to carry on and go this late, as I said, there'll be a lot of people with egg on their face if they weren't to play any part in the tournament.
Yeah, I think as well with regards to those players in particular, I think that the leadership qualities that they could potentially bring offset the 100% fitness requirement. I mean, if they were only 90% fit, the leadership qualities that they could bring to that team is so much more valuable than perhaps the replacements that would get called up.
Yeah, and it's not sometimes what you see on the pitch as well. It's the stuff that's done around the camp when they're together for such a long period of time. The likes of Henderson and Maguire and Kane, I would imagine, are the players who are, you know, making sure everyone's focused, making sure everyone's motivated, chilled out at the right time, relaxation. They'll be the link between Gareth Southgate and his staff and the rest of the group. So, yeah, it's the leadership of the whole tournament, really. It's informing the manager which players, because ultimately, you know, you're talking 26 players and Gareth is going to be disappointing 15 of them every game. And it's those players with the experience and, you know, the respect of the group. They'll be the ones where they'll mark Gareth's card or the staff's card if they don't want to go to Gareth. Steve Holland, Graham Jones, Chris Powell, whatever, with, listen, such and such hasn't reacted very positively to being left out. He's on a bit of a downer or he's angry. All these little pointers, because you've got to try and keep all these lads motivated, focused, happy, looking forward to the game, or keeping right their mentality for training, because who knows when their opportunity is going to rise. The manager might change formations, might change personnel. There could be injuries during the tournament, suspensions. You know, that's the hardest part of management is the players who don't play. It's keeping them right, keeping their heads right. They're angry, they're disappointed. I get it. I've been there as a player, so I fully understand the emotions that they go through, but trying to keep them focused, because they don't know. You don't know when they're going to be needed. Even if you put them on the bench and are disappointed, they might be on the pitch after 1 minute. If they're not in the 18, one day, or the 20, whichever it is, one game, they might end up being a starting player in the next. It's keeping them focused, keeping their mentality, keeping their spirits high, keeping their belief. This is why, you know, in terms of elite football or elite sport, you have so many members of staff. You have, you know, sports psychologists and all these type of people, mind coaches, trying to help that. You know, one of the managers I worked under, rightly said, it's not the starting 11 players that you need to worry about. It's the lads in behind, because they need to motivate those lads, but you also need to keep them right for when they're required, because they will be.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sort of squad depth and leaving players out, as a manager, now if I said to you, who would be your England 11, who would you have as your starting 11? And would you have Grealish and Foden in the same 11?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a difficult question to throw us off the top of my head. I mean, without naming 11, and going back to how I've been brought up under Keegan, I'd find a place for Foden in Grealish. I'd have to, but not to the detriment of the team. I remember Ericsson playing Paul Scholes left midfield during the golden generation time, and it just never worked because Paul, world-class centre midfield player, doesn't probably enjoy playing on the left, still top draw, probably playing there, but doesn't make the same impact. And I think what he tried to do, he tried to fit all his he just got his best players and tried to put them into 11. You cannot do that. You've got to get the best out of everyone, and certainly with the formations that Gareth has used, you could play, 4-3-3 with 2 10s. You could fit them in. You could play, various different formations, 3-5-2 with 2 10s, whatever. Or
it's a nice problem to have, though, isn't it?
Oh wow, they're 2 top class players. The top draw. Obviously Foden has got a ridiculous trophy cabinet for someone so young, so early. That's the only difference between him and Grealish. Grealish is the modern day Gascoigne in terms of how he goes past people and how he can create, and he's never afraid. He's got great courage, and when I mean courage, I don't mean running around kicking people. He's got great courage of taking people on. If it doesn't happen, he goes again. If he tries to slide a pass through Ivan Nile, it doesn't happen, he'll try the same thing again if it presents itself. Foden is just, an unbelievable talent. I just think we've got so many exciting players. We've only touched on a few. There's so many more that we haven't even spoke about. It's an exciting period. It's a tough. It's hard. It's hard for a manager. It'll be hard for Gareth trying to find and fit them all in, because he'll be thinking. Because when he gets to the 11, he'll be thinking, "Oh my, he deserves to be in. He deserves to be in. He deserves." And he'll try and fit a way of putting a new team together. There'll be so many things going through his mind. He just has to, he's done brilliant so far, Gareth, and fingers crossed he can produce, and pick the right teams. The thing we've got is we've got some unbelievable talent that aren't going to start games, so they can be changes. We can freshen the team up in certain games without reducing the quality.
And on the subject of England, Lee, we've got some viewers' questions here, so I'll just go into them and we can sort of hopefully get through them with some quick fire. I mean, the first one is from a guy called Andy Lee on Instagram. It is surrounding England and you specifically. He's asking, do you think your England chances were harmed by moving to Sunderland?
Well, I just got into the Tournament squad in between moving from Newcastle to Sunderland. Obviously, dropping back down to the Championship possibly had an effect. I think I was quite unlucky in terms of the era, the central midfield players I was up against. Ince, Gascoigne, Scholes, Beckham, Batty. So, it was Rob Lee, who was different class in that position. But I just felt I was more than good enough to achieve the full set, because I'd gone through from under 15s and getting to the squad of the full team without getting that full cap. So I wish I was around when Ericsson was about, because he was throwing caps around for fun. So when I see some of the players who got caps during his era, well, I might have broke the cap record.
That's a good one. And Geordie Boyo on Instagram said, what was your most memorable Newcastle game that you played in?
Wow. You always remember your debut. Mine was Bristol City away, 1990, 17, and that was a special moment. Came on as a substitute. My first team debut a couple of weeks later at St James's v West Brom. You try to think your first goal, but I was always a believer goals were only important if you got a result. So my first ever goal was in a 2-1 away defeat at Wolves. So it didn't really matter. The night at Grimsby, where we got promoted, the last game of the season at Leicester, which was just ridiculous. The performances we had in the Premier League and in Europe, it's just too many. It's difficult. If I had known my last ever start was at Stadium of Light when we won 4-1, my last goal at St James's Park and another local derby against Middlesbrough. All these things, it's just, I lived the dream, and it's too hard for me to pick what meant more, because every time I pulled the shirt on, it meant unbelievable amount to us.
And Dan Harrison is asking, who was the best captain you played with?
Well, I played with different captains. I touched on Chris before. Chris was an enthusiastic captain. He was a top player, but he was also a motivational and a talkative captain. Alan was like that, motivational, and obviously and also followed his example, Alan Shearer. But Peter was a real quiet captain, led by example, both on and off the pitch. Peter Beardsley. So, those were different. When I first got in the team, you had the likes of Roy Aitken, who were captains then. Barry Venison was a very inspirational captain. I never seen anyone train as hard as Barry. Barry trained every day like it was a game. I think that was a great insight as a young player, how you should challenge yourself. His training efforts were phenomenal. Him and Paul Bracewell left a big impact on a young squad. So I've been really lucky in the captains I had. I mean, so yeah, those type of guys in different ways.
And I suppose the big question is, we've been kept to last here. Lucas Edwards on Instagram. Do you see Newcastle being a top six club in the next 10 years?
All depends on the ownership. If there's an ownership group that come in that are prepared to invest in the squad and the infrastructure, without a shadow of a doubt, tough, because there's many trying to break into that, and you see how powerful those top six clubs are. But why not? In the early 90s when we got up, and Kevin, he said, let's aim for the stars.
Yeah.
And try and ruffle a few feathers. People didn't believe him. It can happen, but whether we like it or not, there has to be investment. It has to be invested wisely. There's so many clubs that have invested and haven't invested very well. My old club, Fulham, done it a couple of years ago and got immediately relegated. There's other clubs that have done it. Aston Villa diced with death in the first time they came up a couple of years ago. They were big and just avoided relegation. It's not a guarantee, but if you get the recruitment right with the spending power, and your facilities are second to none to attract, because let's not beat around the bush. If Newcastle, and we were obviously one of the big fish when I played, it's difficult to attract the players to the North East if you're competing with London clubs or the European clubs, Manchester even, the North West. Players and their families and their partners would choose them over the North East. I think they're fools, because I'm from the North East and I love it. So, but that's the way it is. So you have to attract them some other ways, and how you attract them to Newcastle is being a big club. Take them to St James's when it's rocking, when there's 52,000, which is a home game. Show them the passion of fans, but also you need training facilities and infrastructure to attract these big players, and that's the key. So that's what you've got to do.
Yeah, excellent response, mate. That's interesting. Yeah, the hard sell. Give them the hard sell and bring them. Get a few brown eels in them, and Don't
take the wives or your girlfriends because they'll definitely not want their boyfriends or husbands moving to Newcastle. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a good show. It's a good show. Right, now, to put you on the spot one last time, we have a section in this podcast, and we've had some belters, mate. So you're up against some very good teams right now. we have had ex-pros pick their best 1 to 11 of players they played with. So that can be across England, Newcastle, Fulham, anywhere you've been, your best 1 to 11, any formation, include yourself. You can pick a manager, you can manage it yourself if you'd rather. But we've had some belters, Mitch. You're up against a few toughies.
Okay. Goalkeeper, Edwin van der Sar.
Straight away.
That one, didn't it?
Yeah, straight away. That's just top draw. Was he a nice guy as well, actually? Because he seems to be thriving at Ajax, and he seems like a really good guy.
Absolutely top class. Great guy. So my left back in the Luton War squad was Stuart Pearce.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
My right back, just pipping Steve Finnan, would be Gary Neville.
Okay, Red Nev will appreciate that, no doubt.
Sol Campbell.
Another excellent choice. Ooh, it's a good side the shaping up this is already.
Philippe Albert.
Oh yeah. We had Albert, did we, in the Warren Barton one as well? Was Albert?
Yeah.
On the left, Ginola.
Ginola, yeah, another one that's come up, yeah, Ginola.
Paul Scholes.
Ooh,
top class.
Top grade. That's different gravy, that is. Yeah. You can put yourself in mind as well if you want, you know.
No, I don't make it. Paul Gascoigne.
Gaza.
Where did you play with Gaza?
Luton War.
Ooh. That was the tournament Roberto Carlos scored the
pre-France 98. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. And they say, don't they, that everyone who's played with Gaza has a story about Gaza. I mean, have you got any?
I've got hundreds, yeah, because I grew up with them. But I'm not sure they're on a family show.
Well, it's a family show, mate, so it's okay. Go ahead.
No, we'll keep that for a separate show, the Lee Clark Gaza show.
Yeah.
Stories.
So
right wing, Beckham.
Oh, that's some midfield.
And this is the hardest part because I'm having to leave out ridiculous amounts of players.
Yeah,
but it has to be Shearer and Beardsley as the front two.
That's a very good side.
And I'm missing out Les Ferdinand, Louis Saha, Andy Cole, Mickey Quinn, David Kelly, Nile Quinn, Kevin Phillips, Michael Owen. So, tough one.
Yeah, that is a tough one.
Teddy Sheringham.
Me and Reese were on about Louis Saha earlier on, and I was like, Reese, he was a great player. Like, I remember watching Saha with Rooney and Ronaldo, and
he went to Newcastle as a youngster, but when he came to us at Fulham, honestly, phenomenal. The way we played 4-2-3-1, he had everything. He was rapid. He had the best leap I've ever seen. He could hang in the air. His athleticism, his finishing with both feet. He was. If we hadn't sold him in that January window at Fulham at the end of the last day on the January. Ended up finishing 9th that season. We would have finished top 6 easy.
Yeah.
But we couldn't replace him in time. We sold him to Man United for 17 million. And we were third at the time. We were third top Fulham. And we dropped down a little bit because he was the focal point of our team. And we went to Old Trafford that season and beat them 3-1. I mean, we absolutely ripped them. And it was because of that, how we done it.
Yeah, a favourite of mine, Louis Saha. So if he's watching, Louis, feel free to come on. I'd love to have a chat with you. But that's a hell of a side. That is a hell of a side.
I think that's the top spot for me. I think
that might be up there. Although even Klasnich is very confident in himself. He would even Klasnich put himself up front as well, FYI. So his team will go up against anybody. But no, that's a hell of a side, mate. That's a hell of a side. I think that's pretty much everything from us, mate. I haven't got anything else I was going to touch upon. What about yourself, Riso?
I'm all good.
No? Brilliant. Well, mate, thank you again for coming on. I know, obviously...
No problem, lads. I've
you're
enjoyed
a busy
it.
man.
Thanks.
Oh, no, the pleasure was all ours. Yeah, no, it was. The pleasure was all ours, mate. We hopefully get you on again some point later down the line. Obviously, best of luck in Sudan. Don't forget the sun cream. You know, make sure you stay hydrated as well. We'll put all the information out on social media. Obviously, make sure you're following everybody up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your comments below if you've got any other questions. Obviously, you know, we can relay them in due course. But yeah, make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, people. And we'll see you next time. Take care. Ciao.
Thank you.